Just for the time that I have to share, I want to talk from these words of preaching. Ain't no stopping us now. Ain't no stopping us now. Music is a powerful form of expression and storytelling with the ability to convey deeper meanings. It has a profound ability to resonate with people, evoking emotions and experiences that transcend words alone. And one iconic example of this is McFadden and Whitehead's 1979 hit, Ain't No Stoppin' Us Now. And this song, with its groovy and disco beat, has made many rush to the dance floor down through the years, leading it to become a chart-topping hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and staying there for 2 weeks. Grammy Award in the year of 1980 for the best R&B song. And in later years, the song resurfaced in 2016 when it was selected for preservation in the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress, recognizing its cultural, historical, and artistic significance. But beyond all of the success, its significance extends far beyond the catchy melody and memorable lyrics. I make this claim because the song serves as a powerful statement of resilience, directly addressing the experiences of African Americans who face decades of obstacles and discrimination. They had to deal with segregation, had to deal with Jim Crow laws, voting suppression, limited access to jobs and educations, and so much more. But despite all of these challenges, at the mark of the post-civil rights era, this song captures and celebrates the milestones achieved by African Americans, including election to public office, enrollment in PWIs, corporate advancement, and the breaking of stereotypes, all because they were now able to do things that others deemed impossible. And thanks to these significant strides, our progress have paved the way for a future filled with promise and possibility. And in the words of McFadden and Whitehead, we can proudly declare, ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. And from the Billboard Hot 100 to the biblical pages of Exodus 14, this message of triumph is echoed when the Israelites faced their moment of victory over oppression, having been freed from 400 years of bondage in Egypt. And this followed God's decisive action, sending the 10 plagues to ensure their freedom. And the 10th plague, which claimed the lives of every firstborn son, broke Pharaoh's resistance, leading to the Israelites' release. And with God guiding them to the promised land, their journey had seemed poised for success. However, as they journeyed, an unexpected turn of events unfolded as they took a route leading them to the Red Sea. When they found themselves at the Red Sea, Pharaoh had a change of heart, and he pursued them in order to regain authority over them. And with the army behind them and the water in front of them, they appeared to be in a dire situation. And to make matters worse, they had no boats that they could ride to get across the sea. They had no bridges that they could walk across to ensure they made it to the other side. They had no blueprint or any clear escape plan, so they were stuck between a rock and a hard place. But let me tell you, just when they thought they were at a dead end, with no way out, God had a plan and made a way where it seemed like there was no way. And he made this possible because he instructed their leader to raise up his rod over the water. And with the mighty wind, he turned the sea into a highway of freedom. And this allowed the Israelites to cross safely while the pursuing Egyptian army was engulfed by the returning waters, ending their oppression once and for all. And like McFadden and Whitehead, they could proudly declare, ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. And this sets the stage for the profound truth that even in impossible situations, God can make a way for and lead us to victory. But to understand that there's no stopping us now. In order to make way to move forward, number one, it's essential that you take action. It's essential that you take action. After they escaped from slavery, the Israelites journeyed to the Red Sea unaware that God was leading them into a trap. This is because where they saw an obstacle, God saw an opportunity. And I make this assertion because by instructing them to camp between the sea and the desert, he allowed Pharaoh to pursue them. He enticed Pharaoh to pursue them, setting the stage for a dramatic display of his power. And he did this in order to allow the Egyptians and the Israelites to recognize him as God. As strange as it may seem, experiencing difficult circumstances can lead you to a deeper and more intimate understanding of who God really is. Because it takes going through a storm to know that God is your shelter. It takes being broken to know that God is your restorer. It takes seasons of darkness to know that God is your light. It takes being lost to know that God is your guide. It takes being weak to know that God is your strength. It takes impossible circumstances to know that God is your miracle worker. It takes going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs to know that God is your peace. It takes being broke as a joke to know that God is your provider. The fact of the matter is, God sometimes has to put you in the valley in order to teach you lessons you're unable to learn on the mountaintop. Because I've learned that these situations allows you to transition from knowing of God to truly knowing God for yourself. But although this was God's plan, the Israelites were oblivious to what God was doing. Therefore, they probably thought that all was lost because it seemed like they had no way out. And it seemed like they had no point of escape. And they even went as far as to accuse Moses. Asked him questions. And said, Moses, why there not enough graves in Egypt? So you had to bring us all the way out into the wilderness to die. But let me tell you, just when they thought all hope seemed lost, Moses assured them that God would fight for them and deliver them from this situation. And given this, Moses gave them some instructions and said, listen, this is what I need you to do. Stand still. And if they wanted to stand still, it meant that they would have to give up on trying to solve the issue on their own and wait for God to intervene. Because I learned that God cannot bless you whenever you're all over the place, because sometimes you can be in God's way. So therefore, they had to stand still. But shortly after Moses urged the people to do this, the emphasis changed from Moses telling them to stand still to God telling him to get moving. This claim is based on the fact that Moses prayed to God between the time encouraging the people and God actually stepping in and making a way for them to go forward. But the specifics of Moses' prayer is not recorded in scriptures. But many scholars contend that even though it's not documented, it must have happened because it clarifies God's response in verse 15. As a result, it appears that Moses is praying and God either interrupts him after a while he's praying and gives him the duty to lift up his rod to split the sea, to make a way for the people to go forward. So basically it's like God told Moses, okay, that's enough talking. Go out there and make something happen. And let me tell you, I know that some of us may scratch our heads and become perplexed, and this may cause controversy for some, because some of you may think that God was rebuking Moses for praying. But let me fix and dispel this misconception, because it's not that prayer wasn't needed or necessary, but God wanted Moses to balance his prayers with actions. And this is a crucial factor we have to think about, because a lot of us pray and feel like we can leave God to take care of the rest. But let me tell you, that's not how prayer is meant to operate. Because prayer isn't a tool to justify your laziness, but it's a catalyst for your actions. And can I tell you that you can miss out on all the great things that God can accomplish in your life, all because you want to pray and do nothing. There was a man who got stranded on a deserted island. This man would pray every single day, Lord, save me from this island. This was this man's prayer. Every single day he waited patiently for that day when he would be rescued from this deserted island. So one day when he least suspected, rescue personnel came to where he was, and they were on a boat, and they insisted that the man get into the boat and they would take him wherever he wanted to go. But the man said, no, fellas, y'all can go ahead, because I prayed to the Lord, and he's the one that's going to get me off of this island. So the people begged and pleaded with this man, but yet and still this man that was stuck, lost, and stranded refused, and he missed the perfect opportunity to be saved because he would not take a step forward to make way for what he needed. And let me tell you, so often we think that God will swoop into our situations like Superman and save the day. But let me tell you, you have to take practical steps towards reaching a solution. And if you don't, you'll stay stuck and stagnant right where you are, and you can miss out on opportunities all because you're unwilling to act. And don't you let this fall on a deaf ear, but let it serve as a reminder to you that we have to get past that I'll pray about it mentality. You want a job. It's not enough to pray about it. Get your sorry butt up and fill out your application. You praying, talking about I'm depressed. But it's not enough to pray. You can go see a psychologist. You praying about that Biden and Donald Trump situation, but let me tell you, it's not enough to pray. But on Tuesday, November 5th, you need to get up and go to the polls and cast your vote. You're praying for your finances, but it's not enough to pray. But you need to get up, go to work, clock in, and put you some money up for a rainy day. The point of the matter is, God wants to help you. But God cannot always give you a handout. Rather, you have to put forth the effort to make way for what you need, because sometimes God interventions necessitates our human participation. So if you want to get to this point where you can say, ain't no stopping us now, want to move, number one, you have to take action. But number two, if you want to get to that point where you can say ain't no stopping us now, you have to trust authority. You have to trust authority. Moses was made aware by God that he had to do more than just pray. Because of this, he wanted Moses to act. But because God told him to lift up his rod, it seemed like what God had wanted him to do was unrealistic. Now, to better get what I'm saying, we must note that this rod was a shepherd's rod. Because before meeting God at the burning bush, Moses had been taking care of his father-in-law's Jethro's flock of sheep. And in addition to this, not only was it a tool for him to use for his sheep, but it also served as a symbol of authority. But despite all of the components and the quality of this rod, it did not possess the inherent power to do what God had intended for him to use. So if I was Moses, I would have said, now wait a minute, God. You want me to lift up a stick and expect the sea to split. Now, God, I'm not the smartest, I'm not the dumbest, but I know that's not how water works. And there ain't no way you can do this with a stick. But let me tell you, although the situation seemed impossible, Moses had to trust in God's authority, relying on his expertise and judgment to resolve the issue. And this trust in God's power is not unique to Moses, because there are many who can stand and testify that God can take ordinary things and achieve something that's extraordinary. It was the dust of the earth that God used to create a man. It was a donkey's jawbone that God used to empower Samson to kill 1,000 Philistines. It was a stone and a slingshot that God had used to enable David to slay down Goliath. It was a little amount of oil and flour that God had used to sustain that widow and her son through the prophet Elijah. It was 2 fish, 5 barley loaves that God used to feed 5,000. So therefore, these individuals serve as examples that God can use whatever you have and accomplish something great. But let me tell you, God cannot use what you have unless you're willing to use it. Now, one way to get your black card revoked is if you tell me you've never seen the movie called Friday. This is a 1995 classic, and though I wasn't even thought of when the movie came out, it's one of my favorite movies, and I can watch it multiple times like I never watched it ever before. I can even quote lines in the movie. What you doing stealing boxes trying to build a clubhouse? I can quote scenes from the movie. But there's one scene where Smokey and Craig walks down the street to Smokey's house. And when they got to Smokey's house, they went into Smokey's room. You know, Smokey was doing what he do. And his mother bust into the room and said, "Hey, Smoke, I want you to go to the store and get me a pack of cigarettes." Now, the thing about it, when she said that, she gave Smokey a $1 bill. Smokey held that dollar up and said, wait, this ain't enough. But his mama looked back and said, "Make it enough." And let me tell you, she was able to say that because she knew that her son would make up the difference if she was willing to use what she had. And let me tell you, you may not have it all and you may not have much, but wherever you lack, God will pick up the slack. And His power will fill in the gaps. Because you may have that associate's degree. You probably don't have a bachelor's. You probably don't have a master's. You probably don't even have a PhD. Yet God can open doors of opportunity, using your skills and knowledge to make a meaningful impact in your life, in your field. You probably didn't receive a full ride scholarship, but trust God to provide additional resources leading you to a degree that's debt-free. You may have a small business, may feel like you're in competition with others, but use what you have and trust God to do something great. Therefore, you have to learn to be appreciative of what you have, because God can use what you have and exceed your expectation. If you want to get to this point where you can say ain't no stopping us now, number one, you got to take action. Got to trust the thought. But thirdly, if you want to get to this point where you can say ain't no stopping us now, you have to travel ahead. You have to travel ahead. While still trapped at the Red Sea with no way out, Moses trusted God to perform a miracle. But just as the people were waiting, God was already working. Because according to the scriptures, the Israelites were shielded from the Egyptians' attack by the angel of the Lord who had gone in front of them, from in front of them to behind them. And also the theophany representing God's presence, a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, moved behind the Israelites, acting as a wall of light for them, but a wall of darkness for the Egyptians. And this made it possible for the Israelites to disappear from the Egyptian sight, making it impossible to pursue them while they were stuck at the standstill. But after God had set the stage for their deliverance, Moses obeyed His instruction, and he used the rod like God had told him to. And when Moses did this, we can see the creation story in reverse. Because specifically in Genesis 1 verse 9, on the third day of creation, God gathered waters together to create the sea. But in Exodus 14, God divides water to separate the sea. And this happened because of a strong east wind that came to divide the waters, causing them to congeal and stand upright. on the left and the right with dry land in the middle, making way for the Israelites to go across. Now we shout over the fact that God made a way out of no way. Indeed, he did. But we have to think about the fact that all that separated them from freedom is their action of moving ahead. Because in my spiritual imagination, I was not there at the Red Sea on that day. But I just believe in my heart that somebody probably said, now, Lord, if we get halfway with the water, close back up. They probably would have said, now, God, I see that it's dry land, but it's probably quicksand and it's stone. As I step on it, I'll start sinking down. They probably even thought that it was something that was used for Pharaoh to trap them and get them. As a result, they could have stayed right where they were, afraid to go ahead. And let me tell you that just because God opened doors for us, it does not guarantee that we'll take advantage of the opportunity that God presents to us. This is because we simply don't know what lies up ahead. These moments are uncertain, and it causes us to become stuck and stagnant right where we are. But let me tell you, if you can never move forward, you can never witness the great things that God can accomplish. Because sometimes God has to move you into better. But because we don't know what lies ahead, we miss out on the doors that have been opened. But let me tell you that it's not until you move forward that God's plan can be fulfilled in your life. Have I got a witness? It wasn't until Abraham left his home that God could make him the father of many nations. It wasn't until Ruth left her homeland and went with her mother-in-law Naomi that she became a part of the lineage of David and the lineage of Jesus Christ. It wasn't until David left his sheepfold to face Goliath that God made him a legendary king. It wasn't until Peter had put down his fishing net that he could follow Christ and become the foundation of the church. All I'm trying to tell you is that God has a plan to fulfill for your life. But if you don't move forward, you can miss your moment. But let me tell you that I'm so glad that the Israelites didn't miss their moment, because the Bible says that they walked across on dry land and they made it to the other side. And Egyptians were pursued in the water, and it ended their oppression. And now they could say, ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. And is there anybody here that can testify that in your life you had some moments when you were stuck in a difficult situation? You had moments when it seemed like you were stuck at a dead end. You had some moments when you thought it was all over for you, but God made a way out of no way. And now you can say, Ain't no stopping us now. Look at your neighbor and encourage your neighbor. Smile at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, I know that you're stuck right now, but tell them I'm coming out. I'm coming out of that depression. I'm coming out of that sickness. I'm coming out of that marriage. I'm coming out of that struggle. Is there anybody here that can testify? I'm coming out and I'm moving forward. So don't stay where you are, because the Lord is moving you to a new beginning. The Lord is moving you to a new chapter. The Lord is moving you to a fresh start. But let me tell you that 2,000 years ago, I came out because I came out of sin. You know what happened? We was seeking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply staying within, seeking to rise no more. But the master of the sea, he heard my despairing cry, and from the waters he lifted me. Now safe am I came out because he was marched up, that scar-shaped heel, nailed him in his hand, nailed him in his feet, riveted him in his side, put a crown of thorns on his head. He died. Is there anybody here that know he died? He died to the sun refused to shine. He died to the moon tripped away in blood. He died to the centurion soldier said, surely this must be the Son of God. But let me tell you, they put him down in a borrowed tomb. And let me tell you, some folk borrow money, some folk borrow clothes, some folk will borrow your car, but I never seen a man that borrowed a grave. But he borrowed the grave because he stayed there all night Friday. He borrowed the grave because he stayed there all night Saturday. But somebody say early, Jesus, he got up, and because he got up, I came out. And is there anybody here that's glad to know that he got up? And if you're glad that he got up, you ought to do what Jesus did and get up on your feet. Ain't he all right? Ain't no stopping us now. Ain't no stopping us now. Look at somebody and tell them we're on the move to something better. Say yeah, yeah, yeah.
Somebody ought to say amen. Ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move.